Welcome back everyone. Today we continue with part 3 of this series called, What If Future Gohan Was Never Killed by the Androids? Let's aim for 350 likes on this one, okay? Also, don't forget to leave a comment letting me know if you've enjoyed the series so far. Let's begin. Gohan jolted awake, the dream fading into the shadows of his mind. He didn't need the dream to remind him of the past. The memories were etched deep into his soul. He remembered when Mr. Popo had descended on his magic carpet, bringing him back to Kami's lookout. Mr. Popo had tended to Gohan's wounds, patiently waiting for him to heal. As soon as Gohan was better, he had flown back down to Earth to fight the androids again. More than 10 years had passed, and Gohan still hadn't defeated the androids. Their menace haunted him every morning. Sitting up in his bed, he absent-mindedly rubbed the stump where his arm had been, the phantom pain still fresh. He stared at the ceiling, lost in the years that had slipped by, until his alarm clock jolted him back to reality. He turned off the alarm with a sigh, realizing he always woke up before it went off these days. He pulled on a t-shirt and some torn-up blue jeans, his mind heavy with thoughts. As he stepped out of his room, the familiar sounds of the morning greeted him. He walked calmly into the kitchen, where Bulma was already seated at the table in a light blue robe, sipping her coffee and reading the newspaper. "Morning," she said without looking up from the paper. "Morning," Gohan replied, heading straight for the fridge. He made himself 6 thick sandwiches and poured a glass of orange juice, then sat down across from Bulma, who finally glanced up at him. "You haven't been eating as much as you used to," Bulma observed, her eyes narrowing in concern. Gohan tried to muster a look of confusion. "What are you talking about? This is how much I usually eat." Bulma looked at him with concern. "No, it's not. There's probably still some bread left over." She paused, stood up and glanced at the counter to find she was right. "I remember when you used to eat at least 2 loaves of bread and probably enough meat to feed an army before downing a whole gallon of milk." She sat back down and stared at Gohan, waiting for his response. Gohan shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "I guess I'm just not as hungry as I used to be," but they both knew he was lying. Gohan never liked taking food from Bulma's home, even though he now lived there. Over the years, due to the constant attacks from the androids, supplies and food had become harder and harder to come by. Even with her status, Bulma struggled to get shipments into the city. It cost nearly $1 million to get other companies to risk their lives to bring in food and supplies, even if she promised them Gohan's protection. They always argued that since he hadn't stopped the androids yet, who could say he'd be able to stop them then? Gohan noticed Bulma's worried gaze and forced a smile. He picked up one of his sandwiches, pretending to take a bite, but instead quickly tossed it over his shoulder. "Damn it!" came a familiar voice, followed by a crash. Gohan's grin widened as he turned to see Trunks, covered in sandwich ingredients, with lettuce hanging limply from his shoulder. "Oh sorry Trunks," Gohan snickered. "Didn't see you there." "Good morning buddy." "Morning," Trunks grumbled, heading to the kitchen. Gohan heard him pouring a bowl of cereal before he returned to the table and slumped into his chair between Gohan and Bulma. "Morning Mom." Bulma smiled warmly at him. "Morning honey," she said, then turned her attention back to the newspaper. Trunks turned to Gohan and whined, "Why can't I ever sneak up on you anymore?" Gohan chuckled, tearing off a chunk of his sandwich. "You can't sneak up on me, kid. It's impossible. I used to be able to." Trunks trailed off, turning his attention to his mother, who was staring intently at her newspaper. "Mom, you look so serious," Trunks said, eyeing the paper in her hands. Bulma replied, "Well, it's the news, honey." Gohan took a sip of his orange juice and chuckled. "She's reading the funnies." Bulma shot a glare at the demi-saiyan for a brief moment before sighing and laying the newspaper flat on the table, revealing the comic. Trunks burst out laughing. "Mom, you got caught." Bulma couldn't help but smile. "How'd you know?" "You kept smiling and giggling. It was easy to tell." Gohan downed 2 sandwiches in a flash and chugged his orange juice. He looked over at Trunks, who had finished his bowl of cereal and was reaching for the box to pour another. "Hey Trunks, after breakfast, you wanna train a little?" He quickly turned to Bulma and added, "That is, if you're okay with it." Bulma sighed. "I'm fine with it. I just hope you're not training him to fight the androids. I don't want my baby killed." Gohan smiled reassuringly. "Of course not. I just need a workout buddy." He turned his attention back to Trunks. "So, how about it, kid? Feeling up for a workout?" Trunks refilled his bowl and began to pour the milk. I guess." Trunks stole a quick glance at Gohan's arm, then at where the other should have been. He always felt awkward sparring with Gohan now. He didn't want to take advantage of Gohan's injury, so he only focused on his mentor's right side during their bouts. But afterward, he always felt unbalanced. He knew Gohan meant well, but he felt that training with Gohan was doing more harm than good. Gohan noticed Trunks' uncertainty and opened his mouth to comment when Bulma interrupted. "Actually, before you do that, Gohan, I was wondering if you could run an errand for me. Gohan finished another sandwich and looked at Bulma. Sure, Bulma. What do you need? Bulma sighed in frustration. Well, it was supposed to be a surprise, but I've been working on a mechanical arm to, replace the one you lost. Trunks' eyes widened at Bulma's words, his thoughts racing excitedly. I could get my old instructor back. We would have a chance against those androids. But the problem is, Bulma continued, I've never been good at those types of mechanics, so I started thinking about Frieza, when he came back to Earth all mechanical. I get it, Gohan said, finishing his last sandwich. You want to use his arm as a starting point. Bulma nearly shouted. Exactly. With that sort of technology, I could easily build you another arm. She put a finger to her lip, thinking for a few seconds before adding, and I could even give you some upgrades. Gohan, how would you like to have a flamethrower? She grinned mischievously. The son of Goku thought about it for a few seconds before answering. While it would be awesome at barbecues, I think I'll pass. Gohan stood up and pushed his chair in. So, where do you need me to go? Well, Bulma bit her lip. That's another problem. I don't know. Both Gohan and Trunks face palmed. Bulma growled at them. Look, I have a few theories about where it could have ended up. Gohan pulled his hand from his face and said, and those theories are? Bulma sighed and said, well, one theory is that it's at a secret military base somewhere in the world, being examined. Gohan tilted his head back and groaned. Gohan, you know full well I have coordinates for all those bases. Yeah, but then there's still the matter of me flying to each one searching for it. Gohan plopped down in his chair, imagining the exhausting voyage. Don't be ridiculous, Gohan. I know if it was delivered to a government facility, it would have been sent to one that specializes in those types of studies, and there are only 3 in the country. Here, she grabbed a notepad and scribbled down the coordinates. This is where they are. She handed the note to Gohan, who quickly studied it. These actually aren't that far away. Gohan pocketed the note and said, so, what's your next theory? You said you had a few theories. What are your other 2? Oh, Bulma quickly answered. Well, the second theory is that it's still somewhere near where Frieza and King Cold landed. Your dad blasted him pretty hard. It's possible his arm wasn't found and is still within a mile radius. Gohan nodded, contemplating how long a mile search would be. And your third theory? That it was completely destroyed by Goku's blast. Gohan laughed, pushing his palm to his face. So, this could just be a wild goose chase, huh? Bulma laughed and shrugged. Yeah, pretty much. Brilliant. Gohan sighed before standing up from the table and heading to the door. He spoke quietly, best be going, as he pulled on his shoes. He had learned to leave them laced. It was too difficult to tie them with one hand. Trunks quickly said, I'll help. Gohan looked back at him, surprised. What? I'll help you search. Trunks walked over to Gohan and grabbed his shoes, quickly putting them on. No, Trunks, it's too dangerous. What if the androids catch up with us? Gohan shook his head. I can't afford to lose you. Gohan, I've gotten a lot stronger since last time. I know I can hold my own against those things. Trunks began to power up. Watch, Gohan. There was a sudden whoosh of air as Trunks powered up to his fullest. Bulma quickly shouted, not in the house, not in the house, while trying to keep her funnies from ripping out of her hands. Trunks immediately powered down and said, sorry, Mom. He turned to Gohan, his eyes pleading. You saw, right? You see how much stronger I am, right? Gohan simply nodded, remaining silent and thinking. While his power has grown, he still isn't close to being on par with even one of those androids. If we were caught off guard, Gohan snapped out of his trance and quickly said, you can come, but on one condition. Trunks nodded enthusiastically, waiting for Gohan's terms. If the androids do find us, you run. You don't try to help me, no matter what. Trunks sulked and said, but Gohan, I know I can help this time. Gohan shook his head, knowing Trunks wasn't going to listen easily. He decided to play the guilt card. Trunks, I can't have you be in the way again. Trunks whined. Gohan, you... Gohan interrupted. Do you remember the last time you helped? Trunks froze at Gohan's comment and looked down, ashamed. Gohan felt a pang of guilt, wanting to take back his words, but he knew Trunks needed to hear them. Trunks wasn't ready to fight the androids yet. He was still young, and until he could go Super Saiyan, Gohan couldn't risk him in any major battles. Gohan stepped forward and put his hand on Trunks' shoulder. Look, I don't blame you for my arm. That was because of the androids, but for now, it's just safer if you don't get involved in the fights. Trunks nodded slowly, then looked up at Gohan. But when will I get to fight? Gohan grinned and ruffled his hair. Trunks, you're still only 14. Let yourself grow up a little before you start fighting. Trunks replied. But Gohan, you were barely older than half my age when you started fighting the androids. Gohan frowned, his eyes glazing over as he recalled the last 14 years. Trunks, that was only because I had to. If I hadn't, the human race might as well be extinct. Bulma listened as they spoke and frowned, realizing that Gohan never really had a childhood. From the time he was 4, he had been fighting. First it was Raditz, then Nappa and Vegeta, then Frieza and his men. Once Frieza had been killed for good, there had been nearly a year and a half of peace. Bulma knew that was when Gohan was happiest. Whenever she visited the Sun family, she would always see Gohan and his father outside the house, playing, or Goku leaning over his son's shoulder, trying to understand Gohan's schoolwork, and Gohan laughing as he tried to explain it. Then Goku had suffered from the heart virus. Bulma remembered pulling in the top doctors from all around the world to try and save her friend, but none were able to. Less than a year later, the androids attacked. They murdered all the fighters except for Gohan, who barely managed to escape. Bulma still occasionally cried at night, longing for her friends, Krillin, Yamcha, even Vegeta. Arrogant bastard, she thought. She hated the man, but she was grateful for the gift he had given her, which she had named Trunks. Gohan continued, "If I could have, I definitely would have enjoyed my childhood, especially my teen years." He grinned at Trunks. "You have a chance to enjoy being a kid. Don't waste it fighting the androids." Trunks nodded but remained quiet, his mind swirling with thoughts. Gohan turned and opened the front door. He stepped out before turning back towards Trunks, who was still standing there with his head down. "Are you coming or not?" Trunks lifted his head and smiled at Gohan before racing out the door. "Yeah, I'm coming." Meanwhile, in a devastated city, 18 watched in amusement as her brother moved the joystick back and forth while rapidly mashing the punch button. Hit him, damn it. "Stop moving," 17 shouted, growing angrier at the arcade game. "Why won't you lose? Stop hitting me." "Foe!" 17 lifted the machine and threw it against the wall, smashing it to bits. "Temper tantrum?" 18 said with a grin. "Shut up," 17 shouted back at her. They had been at this arcade for the last half hour, and every time 17 realized he wasn't good at the game, he would destroy the machine. There were a lot of broken games. 17 looked around the trashed arcade before saying, "Let's get out of here. I'm bored." 18 sighed and said, "All right," before blasting a hole through the ceiling and floating out through it. 17 followed. The blonde android looked across the city as she rose into the sky. The entire city was basically rubble, save the small arcade they had just left, which 17 promptly blasted to bits. 17 floated over to her and said, "You want to hit Pepper City next?" 18 shrugged and said, "Not really." 17 looked at her, puzzled. "Well, where do you want to hit?" "To be honest," 18 began, "I don't really want to hit anywhere." 17 looked stunned. He floated over to his sister and put his hand to her forehead. "Are you okay?" 18 swiped his hand away and said, "Of course I am. I've just been thinking." 17 laughed and said, "So that's the problem." 18 responded sharply, "Shut up, 17. Are you going to listen or not?" 17 nodded and motioned for her to continue. 18 spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I've just been thinking about, well, you know how much we hate Dr. Gero." 17 nodded. "Well, I was just remembering what he was ordering us to do before we killed him. How he wanted us to kill Goku and help him achieve world domination and all that." 17 nodded again. "Yeah, well, I was thinking about how, while we didn't get the chance to kill Goku himself, we did kill all of his friends, except Blondie." 17 nodded again and said, "By the way, we need to get him." 18 pointed a dangerous finger at him and said, "Don't interrupt me." "Sorry." Anyway, 18 continued, "As I was saying, while we didn't kill Goku, we did the next best thing by killing all of his friends. And when it comes to world domination," she motioned to the scene all around them, "we've already done it. No one can stop us. We can do whatever we please whenever we want to." 17 looked at her, confused. "What are you saying?" "What am I saying?" 18 repeated. "I'm saying that we've done everything Dr. Gero asked us to." "And so what if we did?" 17 interrupted her. "We did all this by ourselves. We did it because it was fun. And we did it because we wanted to. But what if we didn't?" 18 countered. "What if Dr. Gero wired us to want to do this, to think that destruction is fun, that killing is fun?" 17 laughed. "That's ridiculous. He couldn't have done that." "Why do you think that?" 18 asked, putting her finger to her chin. "Because it's impossible. No one could rewire someone's brain like that." "But 17, 18 began. "He altered our brains so that we couldn't even remember our lives before we became androids. Hell, I can't even remember what my real name was, can you?" 17 shook his head, and 18 continued, "So what's to say that he couldn't rewire us?" 17 thought about it for a moment before saying, "Alright, let's say he did rewire us. Why would he even let you begin to consider that as a fact? Wouldn't he have put up some sort of defense to make sure you never even thought that?" 18 paused, tapping her chin thoughtfully. That was a good point. Why would Gero let her have this thought? And not only that, why was she only thinking this now? after so many years of their carnage. 18 found herself zoning out, lost in these questions. 17 floated over to her and put his hands on her shoulders, causing her to jump and look up at him. Look, we've done the things we've done because we wanted to, not because some scientist programmed it into us. We are our own people, and no one tells us what to do. 18 nodded, still deep in thought. Her brother's words were comforting, but she still wasn't sure what to believe. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they wouldn't be easily dismissed. So, do you want to go destroy Pepper City now? 17 asked softly. 18 slowly shook her head. Not really, I kinda just want to go home. 17 sighed and said, fine, we can go home, but let's go destroy Pepper City tomorrow, okay? 18 shrugged. Yeah, okay. 17 turned around and was about to blast off when a sudden grin broke out on his face. He turned back to 18 and said, hey, you up for a little bit of Blondie? He pointed up and 18 caught sight of Gohan and Trunks far in the distance, flying by, unaware of their presence. 18 groaned, I really don't know if I'm in the mood. 17 suddenly whined, oh come on, you didn't let me destroy Pepper City, at least let me go and kill Blondie. 18 sighed, fine. 17 smiled at her before blasting off towards the two unaware fighters. 18 followed, her thoughts still swirling. I really don't feel like fighting right now. That's it for this episode, guys. If you've watched to the end, then that may be an indication that you enjoy the episode, so please drop a like so the video could reach more people. See you in the next episode, take care.